senators. Democratic Senator Evan Bayh of Indiana serves both on the Intelligence and Armed Services Committees, so is the perfect person to talk to about all of this. Senator, thanks very much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Andrea.
Well, where do we go? When we sit down at the table, Bill Burns, the number 3 at the State Department, experienced diplomat, former ambassador to Moscow, he sits down with the members of the other permanent 5 members of the Security Council plus Germany. They're facing the Iranian delegation, and Iran suddenly says, oh, by the way, we want to let the Swiss come in and see the 3 American hikers. And we don't say no, because we do want access to those prisoners. But they're completely deflecting the nuclear issue.
Well, we can't let that happen, Andrea. They would think we were fools if we allowed their very kind humanitarian gesture to divert us from the real issue, which is their nuclear program. So we have to keep pushing them. And if they want to absent themselves from these discussions, then we need to go forward with the economic and the financial sanctions to try and get them to change their minds. The Iranians respect one thing and one thing only, and that's strength. They're contemptuous of weakness. And so we need to demonstrate strength here in the face of a very grave threat.
Well, since we did catch them red-handed, according to U.S. intelligence and allied intelligence, we still have to face the fact that what the Iranian negotiators said today, we are not going to discuss anything related to our nuclear rights, but we can discuss disarmament, we can discuss non-proliferation and other general issues. The new site is part of our rights. There is no need to discuss it.
Well, they have a right to civilian nuclear power. We've offered them that. They refuse to accept our offer. So it's pretty clear you don't repeatedly hide and lie about facilities that are within their rights. It's only if you have something else in mind, which is pretty clearly a nuclear military component. So if they're willing to discuss that, then perhaps we can get to the heart of the issue. But I don't think we should be naive and let them dissuade us from discussing what really is on the table. Otherwise, it's just going to be a very elaborate waste of time for everyone involved.
Do you think that our intelligence is correct, as was outlined last or 2 years ago now in the intelligence estimate on Iran, that Iran did in 2003 give up attempts to weaponize a nuclear warhead? Or do you think that the allies who have a different point of view, not only Israel but also France and others, believe that they have worked on a nuclear warhead?
That intelligence estimate was very misleading, and it did us no favors with regard to rallying world opinion to try and meet this threat. Buried in a footnote, Andrea, it pointed out there are 3 components to a nuclear program. Number 1, getting fissile material. They're going full force ahead to try and generate the fissile material. Number 2 is a delivery system. They're continuing with their missile technology development. Number 3 is the weapons design. They had progressed far enough with the weapons design they could afford to put it on the shelf for a while still going full forward on the other 2 components, knowing that if they were successful on those 2, actually constructing the bomb itself wouldn't take very much time at all, 6 months, something like that.
How long do you think that we would have at this stage before they could have an effective weapon?
Well, there is this line of thought that they could have sort of a sprint to the goal line and try and accelerate something possibly within 9 to 12 months. But absent that, that would be, highly provocative, assuming that we were aware of it. But absent that, you're looking at somewhere in between a year to 3 years, I think, is probably a reasonable window. But you don't know what you don't know, correct? Remember, we were all surprised when India tested their nuclear device. Pakistan, the same thing. There is an unavoidable element of uncertainty here, Andrea, and that's why it's important that we act sooner rather than later and not let the Iranians just slow walk us to the point where they actually have already achieved the goal that we are trying to prevent.
Now that we know about this one site, which we've known about for quite some time, but we've seen the more extensive construction at this site, and now we know the configuration and have pretty good intelligence, we're told, the President certainly asserts this, as do the allies, that it is too small to be used for peaceful purposes, that it, from this configuration, could only be used to produce nuclear weapons fuel. We know about this site, but don't we suspect that there are more than this site? We don't, as you just pointed out, we don't know what we don't know. There could be as many as a dozen other secret sites?
Andrea, I think it's reasonable to assume that there are other sites of which we are unaware. And that's one of the things that complicates the military option. You can strike facilities that you're aware of. By definition, you cannot attack facilities that are hidden from you. You don't know where they are. So I think it's reasonable to assume there are other facilities. That's something the intelligence community works very feverishly on. We have greater insight into Iran than we do into a place like North Korea, but it is still far from perfect insight. So I think that is a reasonable assumption.
And I know that there are a lot of sirens there where you are up on the hill, but let me ask about sanctions. Do you think sanctions can work to slow Iran down and to prevent Iran from getting a weapon?
Probably not, but they need to be tried because, number one, they might work. I mean, if we can ratchet up the economic and financial pressure sufficiently, with their economy already being very weak and there already being some divisions within that society, perhaps they will change their minds. But I think what this really comes down to, Andrea, is an assessment of the character of the Iranian regime, and this involves psychology as much as anything else. Will they behave like a rational nation state, calculating their costs and benefits from different courses of action? If so, then sanctions have a chance to work. If, on the other hand, the people at the very top are driven more by theocratic concerns, if they are truly radicals, Ahmadinejad, as you know, has made some highly provocative statements, if there's even a small chance that they would misuse a nuclear weapon, well, then that's a risk you just simply can't run, and it's unlikely that sanctions would get us there, and then you have to consider other courses of action. But as I intimated earlier, those are far from perfect alternatives either.
Not a good scenario. Thank you very much, Senator. Very good to see you. Thanks for your help today.
Always a pleasure.